And now, here's another episode of On Campus with your host, Coach Mark.
Hey, it's Coach Mark here. Just finished a podcast here at Founders Park in Columbia, South Carolina with Coach Monte Lee, the hitting coach here and the assistant head coach. Wow, what a podcast this was. This was 10 things that parents could be doing unknowingly to hurt their son's chances of playing at the next level. We didn't pull any punches in this one. It's really, really good information for parents of young baseball players. Coach Monte Lee, let's get after it right now. Coach Lee, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while, so thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad to do it.
So I want the listeners to know how we have this set up. So normally I have an agenda. I share with the coaches. They probably review it and everything, so they're all prepared. I did that with you, and you said, nope, I don't even want to know.
Yeah.
I just want to have a great conversation, and I love that because, folks, he doesn't know what's coming, so this is really, truly spontaneous. So are you ready for the drum roll, what we're going to talk about?
I am ready.
Okay. So I was looking at your background, and you have a teaching background.
I do.
And I also noticed that you have a lot of great material already out on social media. And I just got the feeling like it's all designed to give back, especially, it seems, to parents.
Yes. Yeah. Well, for me, I try to stay true to myself in what I do for a living. And I try to never forget why I got into coaching to begin with. And why I got into coaching to begin with is to serve the players that I coach, to serve the communities where I'm coaching, to help parents, to help other coaches, to give back to the game that's been so good to me, and to give everything I can to the players that I coach. So that's kind of been the way that I've always been as a coach. I try to give information out to those who want it and try to help, people, in their walk in the game of baseball.
Well, one of the things I noticed is you don't just give it back. You actually give it kind of unfiltered. Like you're not sugarcoating things. Mm-hmm. And folks, I just want to remind everybody, this is going to be a great podcast, I know, but there's so many other great segments out on social media, on YouTube from Coach Lee. So make sure you're watching those as well. But today I'm going to dial it in.
Okay.
And we're going to struggle to keep this on the positive side because the title of this, now that we're unveiling it, is 10 things that parents are doing that can hurt their child's development and opportunities.
Okay.
Now, I did go take the liberty of listing what I think 10 things are out there, but the most important thing is not the subject, it's your opinion of this.
Yes.
So I wrote them down, and I just want to, and like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to stay on the positive side because these are kind of negatives. But before I even get into this, let me just say something. When you and I grew up, correct me if I'm wrong, my parents weren't that involved in my little league and all that.
Right.
They would say, how'd the game go? We won. Okay, get ready for dinner. That was about the extent. Was it similar to you?
So I had a great childhood. I was very blessed to have two parents, both of which were former athletes.
Okay.
So my mom, my mom played basketball. She played softball growing up. My dad was a three-sport athlete. My dad was a high school quarterback, played baseball, played basketball. They played in a very small rural town where they grew up. So they had to play all the different sports, right? So I was very blessed, my sister and I, to have two parents that were very structured, very demanding of us when it came to schoolwork, chores around the house, living a very disciplined childhood. But when it came to sports, sports was extra. Sports was an opportunity for us to compete for our communities. My sister and I were both, pretty good athletes, and we played multiple sports growing up. But there was no pressure put on us to perform. It really was never about that. It was really more about what could sports teach us, and for us to be involved in sports, to be more well-rounded kids.
Exactly.
So I didn't quite understand as a kid, once I got to high school and even into college, I really didn't kind of understand why parents were hard on my teammates, my friends, when it came to performance, because my parents were not like that. My dad, after a game, we may talk about the game. We may talk about how I played, but I never really felt any pressure put on me to perform by my parents. And I think that really helped me when I got into college, and then even when I got into coaching, when it came to how to treat players, how to coach players. More than anything, we have to make sure that athletes understand that they're people first. Like, we care more about the person than we do the player.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been my model ever since the beginning that I've gotten into coaching, is I want to try to take the pressure off the player.
Yeah.
When it comes to performance, and treat them like a young man, develop them as a young man, help them in their journey in the game of baseball, and just let the production, so to speak, the results kind of take care of themselves.
We are getting to that one. It's actually my number one. But before we even get to that, the phenomenon of youth sports, and this is where I started, like, why is all this, why are they so involved when our parents weren't as involved? And I just think it's the phenomenon of organized youth sports, where parents didn't have a role model to see how now they're trying to figure it all out. And this is just Mark Helsel talking. I feel like they haven't figured it out yet. It's like swung from maybe parents not that involved way back to now they're way over involved. So these 10 things that I want to talk about are leaning in parents overstepping their bounds, so to speak. We might hurt some feelings today, but it's okay. The point of these podcasts is to educate parents and players. I'm going to the coaches because, and I always say, you guys are the holy grail. You guys are making the decisions on these kids. You're making assumptions on parents. So let's get into it. I don't mean to build this up. Number one, I have on my list, and you already said it, it's focusing on results. So what can you say we're talking to parents today, how do you not focus on results?
It's a good question. I mean, and that's where, the process of becoming a good player, versus the results, and trying to, how you define what success is. The very first thing that I would say when you're talking about results, okay, is just think about it this way. You don't know my batting average from high school. Right. You don't know my batting average from Pony League when I was in middle school. Right. You have no idea what championships, I won when I was a kid, or where we placed in the 6th grade, or, any of that. And quite honestly, nobody else does either, except for me and maybe my parents. Right. So I think it starts with that. It's just understanding that as a parent, that when it comes to individual accolades of an athlete, whether it's their velocity on the mound, or their exit velocity, or how many hits they get, or what their batting average was, or things along those lines when they're kids, it really doesn't matter, quite honestly. Like, it doesn't matter. It's all about, look at it this way. We want to help kids become the best players that they can be, but they got to understand what it takes to be a good player versus trying to be a starter, or trying to, earn an opportunity to get a scholarship, or, any of those things. I think sometimes we get so far ahead of ourselves when it comes to those things, because of all the exposure that kids get today through social media, rankings and recruitment and things along those lines. And sometimes, we forget they have to look forward to coming to the field first and foremost. They have to enjoy just playing the sport. And I think when you start putting more pressure on them when it comes to results, for no reason, we're not looking at, a 12-year-old and, if they won, best hitter or most valuable player in a 12U tournament, we could care less. Right. I mean, that's not even like on our wavelength as coaches. So therefore, it's really like, how important is it really? So,
and that's such a great answer, but the parents struggle with this so much, and I'll tell you how I know. I'm working with parents of young athletes, and And, I'm pretty selective with who I work with. And so what do you think they do to try to impress me? They start throwing stats at me. 8-year-olds, on-base percentage, batting average, strikeouts, ERA. I mean, I'm telling them I don't care. And yet they're so focused on it. And then they think guys like you are paying attention to that. And you're not.
We don't pay attention to it at all. And quite honestly, I mean, just to give you an example, we're getting ready to sign our 2026 class, right? And I mean, these are guys that are starting their senior year of high school. We don't know their high school stats. So, I mean,
our parents listening.
Yeah, like we don't
doesn't care about high school stats.
We don't know their high school stats or, any of those things. The bottom line is the recruitment of a player much later on now, and the NCAA's put in rules, to keep us from recruiting kids as early as we were, which I think is great. But bottom line is, when it comes to the recruitment part of it, we're recruiting skills.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily recruiting kids based on stats because we don't know their stats.
Right.
So, quite honestly, I think that, focus less on those things because quite honestly, they really don't matter.
They don't matter. And even worse, they're creating the pressure, as you said. So it's a double whammy to focus on these things that don't matter and they create pressure. All right, man, we got entities to go over. I mean, number 2 is a little different. And this is probably more for the older kids that you're maybe recruiting sometimes, but parents speaking on behalf of their son, for their son. I'm sure you've run into it.
Personally, I look, we want to have great relationships in the process with the player and with the parents. I mean, engagement with the parents is very important. The parents being involved in the process is certainly important because, look, they're making family decisions. One of the things that I would say makes me cringe a little bit is when I hear a parent say, well, it's completely his decision. Well, it's really not just his decision. Like, you're his parent. You're there to guide him. He's a teenager, right? Like, I mean, and these are major life choices that you're making. So you're there to guide him. But on the other hand, he has to be able, or she, they have to, young teenagers, they have to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, right? So, and I think that's very important that they learn through experiences by speaking for themselves. As a parent, again, you're there to guide them, but you're not there to speak for them and answer for them.
And I guess an example I would, and I'm sure you had this, where you might say to a kid in a recruiting talk visit, so tell me what you're looking for in a school. And the parent jumps in and says what he really wants. And they start doing that. And is that kind of a turn off red flag for you?
Well, I mean, to me, look, let's just keep it as simple and as honest as possible. The more capable a young man or young lady is when it comes to speaking for themselves and what their interests are and what's important to them. As coaches, we tend to think that those types of kids are what? They're more mature.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It shows a level of maturity.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so to me, if a parent is speaking for the kid constantly, not allowing the kid to speak or the young man, young lady to speak, it makes us think, at least, that the perception is, well, maybe, that the kid is not mature enough to speak on their own behalf. So I think it's important that you give your kids the flexibility to speak on their behalf, for sure.
Well, especially guys you're recruiting in the SEC. I mean, these kids are going to have a microphone in front of them pretty quickly. If they've never really been learned to speak for themselves, they're going to struggle with that. Sure. So, all right. Well, we're on to number 3. It's just already just gold and stuff. But number 3, in the same direction of parents, and that is making excuses for their sons. I get this all the time, why they didn't perform, and they have every reason under the sun. How would you address that one?
Well, look, the game of baseball, I can only speak on, the sport of baseball, as it's, again, the only one that I have experience when it comes to coaching and recruiting to, but the game of baseball is hard. I mean, this is a hard game, and sometimes you just don't perform, right? I mean, and sometimes you go through those stretches where you're 0 for 10. And you go through those stretches where you're 8 for 10, right?
Right.
And, at the end of the day, it's completely up to you, right? And it's up to you to deal with the failures of the game. You have to be able to manage the failures of the game. You know, one of my favorite quotes on baseball is a hard game built for hard men.
That's good.
I mean, it's a hard game built for hard men. And what that means is you got to be pretty mentally tough between the ears to handle all the ups and downs of playing the game of baseball. And you have to be able to navigate those on your own to a degree. You're the only one that can stand in the batter's box and compete. You know, your dad can't step in there and hit for you. And so, you know, I say that in that I think the more you allow a young man or a female who's playing softball, the more you allow them to just deal with it on their own and understand their own. You don't make a thing a thing. I think that, you know, it helps you when it comes to navigating the ups and downs of the game of baseball. So excuses, we can't make excuses. Like we don't allow our players. It's a non-negotiable with our hitters, and I work with our hitters here. We just don't make excuses, period. We're 100% accountable for everything that happens to us and everything that we do. And, you know, you have to be that way, quite honestly, if you're going to play at the highest level of baseball, because the game only gets harder as you go.
Yeah.
So, you know, making excuses do absolutely nothing for you. You know, we can't keep talking about the problems that kids are having. You better start thinking about what are the solutions, right? It's really that simple.
So this is a big misconception too, that, you know, from a lot of parents. I don't mean kick on the parents without a baseball background, but I think it's hard for people with a baseball background, but without a baseball background to know how hard this game is. They see their kid failing. Maybe you're there watching them and they're sitting there. And my wife actually did this, like, oh, he's never going to get a scholarship. He just made an error, you know, and you're looking at it like everybody makes errors. I want to see how he handles the error. You know, the mom and dad are like, well, the reason I think he's not feeling well today, and that's probably why he struck out a couple times. So when you say you don't allow excuses, I don't want to take us too far in this direction, but I'm really curious. Kid comes back and says he just struck out on 3 pitches down the middle, didn't swing the bat, and he says, yeah, I could see the ball. I wasn't picking it up. Is that an excuse, or is that actually that's what happened? Like, that's a legit thing.
Right.
How do you view that?
That's where you have to have a really good relationship with your players. I mean, I think just, you know, kind of going back to the beginning, it's like caring more about the person than the player and getting to know the person first and understanding, like, when things are going well for them, you know, what are they doing well? When they're struggling, you know, what's going on, and being able to have conversations with them and communicate with them, you know, in a way where there really is no excuses allowed, and they're just being completely honest. There are times where players simply just don't see the ball very well, right? I mean, it's just really that simple. So, you know, if I've got a player, you know, that in that case, right, comes back to the dugout and just didn't take a bat off his shoulder, didn't swing, was very passive, and they tell me, look, I'm just not seeing the ball very well, then that is a problem that we need to find a solution to, and we will hammer that.
I got you.
Right. So as far as, you know, I wouldn't necessarily look at that as an excuse, as long as I have a relationship with that player to understand when they are telling me the truth and when they are making excuses.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a wisdom and coaching experience there.
Yeah, but the excuses, no, like, we can't make excuses. We just don't have time for it. It's really that simple. Like, you just don't have time for it. Again, a lot of it too is, if you want to develop mental toughness, you know, mental toughness is a big deal in the game of baseball. Well, how do you develop mental toughness? The most mentally tough players in the game of baseball are the ones that could simply move on the fastest.
Yeah, right.
You know, and not harp on, you know, the struggles that they're having in the game, you know, in the moment, or, you know, over the course of 3 or 4 ball games.
All right, we're on number 4, and we already kind of talked about it, but I just want to peel it back a little bit more. But parents making all the decisions for their sons, let's say, or daughters, well, you know, the kids really don't have a strong input anyway. I mean, have you seen that? And is that a red flag for you, where parents are just, it's almost like they're living vicariously through their son?
I'll answer it in a different way.
Okay.
I'll give you an example of something that I felt like was pretty profound, that I learned many, many years ago from a dear friend of mine who's in the scouting department, right? He's in the scouting department of a pro organization. I won't name the organization, but basically this guy's role was to interview for this particular pro organization, all of the players who they deem would be a top 3 to 4 round type draft pick, like the best of the best.
Okay.
This guy goes in and interviews the best of the best, right? And they're trying to determine whether a player is going to be a first round pick, a second round pick, or somebody that they would pass on, right? Mm-hmm. And I asked him, I said, of all the interviews that you give to the best players in the United States year in and year out, what do you find is the number one quality of the players that you draft super high in the draft and they actually make it to the big leagues? And what he told me was pretty profound. He said it's purely self-motivation. The players that if they're a pitcher, you ask them like, hey, who taught you how to pitch? Yeah. How'd you develop your delivery and your repertoire on the mound? And like, who taught you how to pitch? The answers that kept coming from the guys that were the best of the best was, well, quite honestly, I had a bullpen in my backyard and, I just went out there and worked with my dad and, we didn't really work on, anything in particular, but just throwing strikes. And I developed kind of my own way of doing things. I went to the weight room. I read up on, how to train as a pitcher, and I kind of developed my own way of doing things. Right. Coaches were more of a guide, more of the guardrails for me, but I already had an idea of what I did well. Right. Same thing as a hitter. It's like I just went in the backyard with my dad or my high school, and my dad would throw batting practice to me, and I literally would just work on hitting the ball up the middle or the other way. And I developed my own way of doing things, and then coaches just kind of helped me, after I had already developed kind of my own self-awareness. Right. Does that make sense? Yeah. So he called it just self-motivation. And the bottom line was the kids who had their own personal hitting coaches and own trainers, and everything had been set up for them to go to this session and this session and this session. Well, what happens when that player struggles? They don't know how to fix it because they've never had to do it on their own.
That's great stuff.
So that taught me a lot about, sometimes just strictly being overcoached is a problem for kids at a young age. Yeah. And if they have a pretty good understanding of themselves and then they start adding in coaching, those are the kids that tend to do a little bit better because they're the most natural version of themselves. Right.
I think a lot of parents struggle with this one a lot because they think they need to be the motivational force behind all this, and especially when they got a kid that isn't showing, I call it the baseball gene. Some of these kids are just grinders. I swear they came out of the womb ready to go, and they're driven. But if you're the parent of a kid that those kids, right? You see those kids, and then you look at your kid, and he's not that way, and then they're trying to make him that way. Right. Well, do you think self-motivation is innate? Is it kind of born? Can you teach it? Well, I mean, what would you say to a parent that says, I don't know if my kid's really into it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think that, when it comes to self-motivation, do I think it can be taught? Sure, it can. It can be taught by the parents simply by, look, I'm pretty self-motivated simply because I think at a young age, I saw that I had two parents that worked really hard. Yeah. My parents had tremendous work ethics. Our house was always spotless. And it had to stay spotless. Right. And when you sat down at the dinner table, you put a napkin in your lap and you chewed your food with your mouth closed and no elbows on the table, and you washed the dishes and I had to cut the grass and pull the weeds. And so my parents demanded me to work even as a young kid, and they were pretty tough on me. Yeah. So there was a pretty high standard that was set for me and my sister at a young age. And we just kind of had to be that way. Right. And I think I just developed that really, I don't know if I myself was self-motivated, so to speak, but I just developed a pretty good work ethic for myself. And then as I got into sports, I found that, baseball was a sport that I liked the most. Yeah, right. So I wanted to work on it the most. So I would go, that. Yeah. So I would go to the cages and hit on my own a lot. And I think that's a big deal. It's like you have to, if your kid doesn't love the sport, it's going to be really hard for them to be really good at the sport.
Exactly.
They got to have that love for the game, at a pretty young age. And if they do, they tend to work on it a little bit more.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good segue into number 5. It's similar in the sense that I see a lot of parents doing a lot of things for their kids. They're carrying their bags. They're bringing them drinks during the game. They're buying them the most expensive gear, like just do. And I think it's almost the opposite of what you just described, where you had to do. You had the obligation on you to do it. So when you, as a recruiter, when you see, do you ever notice that some parents, or they call them helicopter parents, are hovering over, they're doing all these things for their kids instead of letting the kids carry their own bag?
I don't, look, I'm obviously looking at kids when they're a little bit older, right? Like, I mean, these kids are, typically like, junior year of high school and that kind of thing. So we're not necessarily watching kids when they're 12, 13 years old. But listen, big league players carry their own bags. Like college guys carry their own bags. So, I mean, I don't, and look, I understand, look, if you're in the middle of July and you're playing in Atlanta and you're 12 years old and, you need something to drink. There's no water in the dugout. Mom wants to get you a Gatorade. Look, I completely understand that. But I do think, too, when it comes to putting your bag together, carrying your own bag, keeping up with your equipment, those types of things, that's really on the player.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that's a skill that every young man and every, and every athlete needs to learn.
Yeah.
You need to keep up with your stuff, and you need to be grateful for the fact that you have parents who can afford to buy you the gear,
right?
That it takes to play the sport, and I'm not a guy that says, back when I played, we didn't have all this, that, and the other. I'm really not, that's not going to really resonate, I think, with kids today. But I think there needs to be some level of appreciation for the fact that you have a parent or parents that can afford that type of gear and give you that opportunity to play the game that you love and have all the things that you need to be successful.
No doubt. Well, number 6, and again, these are all overlapping, but this one has to do with motivation. We've already talked about motivation, but I used to say to my son, look, I'm not going to be more motivated to do this than you are. I'll match your motivation.
Right.
Running a travel program, I had parents that they would confide in me. Yeah, he really didn't want to make this trip. He's kind of tired of traveling. I had to really crack the whip to get him in the car. We had a kid up in Cooperstown one year. We couldn't get him out of bed. He literally, and we gave him a countdown. If you're not out of bed in 3 seconds, you're not playing today. And guess what? He didn't get out of bed. And, I just wonder, like, was that because his parents weren't there to motivate the kid? I don't know. But again, just one more time on the motivation of these young kids. How do you look at that? Is it the responsibility of parents, or are they overstepping their bounds?
Well, I think it's the responsibility of the parents. I mean, listen, I think maybe the biggest difference from, my childhood to kids today, and I saw this, look, as when I first finished playing, went back and finished my degree, I was a teacher. I taught in the classroom for a few years before I moved into college baseball coaching full time. And I think the biggest change probably for that I saw from my childhood, to this day and age is if you didn't do well in school when I was growing up, it was your fault.
Yeah.
If you don't do well in school now, a lot of times it's the teacher's fault.
Right. Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is we always want to blame the coach if the kid's not playing well. The finger is always pointed away from us versus pointed to us. Right. And I think that's where, again, the accountability, by the young man and by the parents to say, hey, look, like, this is on you, buddy. Like, right. If you want to be good at this, you got to work at it. Yeah. And if you don't play well, you continue to work on it. And we're going to support you and we're going to be there for you. Right. But at the end of the day, this is completely on you. And you got to get out of bed and put the work in, and you got to show up ready to go. And, things aren't always going to come easy for you. But if you have a passion for this sport, you got to check in and play. Yeah. And that's really what it boils down to. And I personally think that, we've lost a little bit of the own personal accountability for everything. Yeah. And again, I just think everything's your fault. I just that's how I live my life. Yeah. Because life isn't fair. Yeah. It's not always going to be your fault when things don't go well for you, but you got to look at how to fix it.
Right. No,
that's just the way that's the way the world works.
I think a lot of parents are really, really making this hard by trying to be that motivation. I mean, again, I didn't have the energy to motivate someone else, even though he's my son and it's his career. I mean, and I'm his dad. I just didn't have the energy. I was putting my motivation into my stuff, and I wanted to watch to see if he could come up with his own motivation, which he did. But I think a lot of parents, they just trying to provide this artificial motivation, and the kid, I mean, let's be honest. Some kids aren't meant to play baseball, or, it's okay if they don't want to play baseball, and maybe they're phenomenal at music or something,
Sure.
But not everybody's going to be a big league player.
Absolutely.
So if you have a kid that's not super motivated, I mean, maybe that's not the thing for him to do.
Sure.
So we got to go on to number 7, which is this is radical, what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Kids actually, and I'm asking your opinion on this, and kids actually financially helping out a little bit. You mentioned about appreciating your parents. They're working hard and now they're buying you $500 bats. But I've always thought about the concept of kids being involved in some capacity. You mentioned you had chores and you cut the grass. I don't know if you got compensated for it, but what do you think about kids like as a developmental tool to help them appreciate the money that is going into this?
Oh man. Well, I mean, look, you don't learn to appreciate the value of the dollar until you actually have to go work yourself. I mean, it's really that simple.
It's so true.
When I was in the ninth grade, and this wasn't something that my parents pushed on me, and it was just like, hey, look, buddy, if you want money, you're a teenager, and if you want money, you need to go get a job. So I did. So I remember, I laid tile one summer on a tile crew. I did sheetrock work for 2 summers, and I worked a full-time job and played American Legion baseball at night. By the time I got to the game, there were times where I was smoked pretty good.
Yeah, right.
But it was just part of it. It was just part of growing up. And it was just as simple as, look, if you want money, go get a job.
Yeah.
And I did. And doing that type of work really made me value in education and going to college.
Absolutely.
I did not want to do drywall for the rest of my life after working on a drywall crew. I didn't want to, put tile down in bathrooms after doing that for a summer. It just wasn't something that I was really interested in doing. So perspective is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
I think that if you want, kids to appreciate money and what it costs to buy a bat and gloves and all the things that you need to play baseball, there's nothing wrong with getting a job and learning those skills, dealing with other people, having to be somewhere on time, having to work, saving your money, spending your money wisely. Those are all very valuable life skills that I guarantee you, if you ask the parents of kids today, well, that's how they grew up, right? Yeah. And what was wrong with that?
Right.
Not a darn thing. So why aren't we doing the same things for our kids today?
Yeah, no, I love your answer. I used to do a thing with my kids. I would say, hey, you guys want to go out to dinner? And they go, yeah. And I go, you guys okay with paying for your own dinner? And they go, no. They were fine if I was buying it.
Sure.
But they didn't want to spend their money on it. It wasn't worth that.
Right.
And it was just a little litmus test of, when it's your money, it's a whole different ballpark. So I love your answer. Having kids, I mean, I had a paper route when I was 12 years old. I know that we live in a different era, but I just remember I stood at a grocery store and people would walk by, and it was called the Pennsylvania Grit. And I would stand there and I'd say, would you like to buy grit? Would you like to buy grit? And they'd just walk by, ignore me. No. And then every once in a while, somebody would say, yeah. And I mean, that was a valuable lesson. Like you just hear a bunch of no's till you get a yes. It's coming. So number 8, we've talked about this a little bit, but this is solving problems for their kids. I want to go back to that one. Parents sometimes they get into this mode of they're going to coach their son up. So every time their kid fails, they're going to come up with the solution for them. And you already talked about it, but I think it's dangerous when parents just don't let their kids just work through it. I mean, have you seen that, or what wisdom can you share with us about parents just taking it on the chin with their kids failing?
Well, again, I mean, what is our responsibility as a parent? I mean, at the end of the day, your responsibility as a parent is to make sure that once your child leaves your home, that they can go out into the world and be productive citizens.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And really that's your your primary responsibility. So for me, how a kid performs at a baseball game probably doesn't have a whole lot to do with that end goal.
Yeah.
From my experience, the parents who were less involved, who just came to the game and watched and really weren't cheering their kid on and, talking to them, after every at bat, I hear, so many tips from parents out of the stands when a kid's literally in the box trying to hit. Right. And that's got to be tough, and I understand where it comes from. Look, parents want their kids to be successful. I certainly understand the intent behind it. But I have found, when we bring a kid in on a visit and the parents tell me, we just never thought in a million years that, our son would wind up, being recruited at a school like this. Like they're almost like in awe that it worked out the way this is. Those parents were probably less involved in the development of the player as a baseball player, right, and way more involved in the development of them as a citizen and as a student.
Yeah.
That to me is the recipe for success.
Yeah.
It's just, again, about, having high standards for doing things the right way. But when it comes to sports, again, just let them play.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you just let the kids just go out and play the game, they'll show you what they're capable of and what they're made of. If you've done a good job in instilling discipline and hard work and putting the team first.
Yeah.
Look, if you put the team first, and you're more selfless than you are selfish, you're going to play better baseball.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, it's just really that simple. If you just only focus on yourself, your own individual accolades, your stats, your ERA, all of that stuff, and you're not focusing on the team first, you're going to put more pressure on yourself to perform. If you just focus on the team, just do what I can to help our team win and make it about the team, and you're more selfless, I promise you will play better baseball. You'll get where you want to be by being selfless far more than if you're selfish and only worried about your own individual accolades.
Boom. Wow, Coach, it's amazing how fast an hour goes by. We're on the last segment of this. We've covered 8 great points. We've got 9 and 10, and then we have 2 things to share with parents. On a positive note, we're talking a lot of the things not to do, and I get it. It feels a little negative, like all these things, but we're going to end this on a positive note. But we got to get to 8 and 9, and 8 has to do with parents feeling like they're the coach. They're coaching, and you mentioned earlier coaching from the stands, one of my biggest pet peeves. You got a coach who's coaching them, but now you got mom and dad up in the stands yelling, keep your back elbow up and stuff. So how should parents view turning their son over to coaches? Sometimes when you don't always agree with the coach, right? Mm-hmm. What could you tell parents about just trusting that process instead of being the coach?
To me, the value of a coach is in practice, especially at a young age. Like at a young age, kids need repetition.
Right.
They need repetition. They need a lot of ground balls. They need a lot of swings. They need to run the bases. They need to learn how to play the game through repetition. So for me, it's more about doing when they're young, and less about talking.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. As they get a little bit older, you can cut the reps down a little bit and explain a little bit more, become a little more technical with kids as they grow.
Yeah.
And the game gets a little bit harder. But I think at a young age, they need a lot of repetition. So for me, when it comes to how you should view a coach as a parent, what do the practices look like?
Yeah.
Are the kids getting plenty of swings? Are they running the bases? Are they working on defense? Are they working on the fundamentals of the game? If you get done with practice and your kid's like, man, we practiced pretty dang hard today, that's probably the sign of a pretty good coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite honestly,
right.
A coach doesn't have to at a young age or at the youth level, it doesn't have to be, this super technical, highly intelligent person that knows, the ins and outs of everything about the game of baseball.
Right.
Again, it's a pretty simple game. If you throw the ball over the plate and you catch the ball and you put the ball in play on a pretty regular basis, you're probably going to be a pretty good team, right? So you just got to work on those skills. So I would look at, as coaching is if a coach is working to develop the skills of the players through practice, when it comes game time, just let them play and have fun.
Yeah.
So if your coach is doing that, there's no need to blame your coach for anything. Quite honestly.
And that is a part of this question is I get this a lot. Parents blaming coaches and worse, talking to their son about the bad coach. And I just think that is really detrimental to the player. Again, back to excuses. But, there are bad coaches. There are guys that aren't doing what you're talking about doing, and people need to make some decisions. But I guess where I'm going with this is I see a lot of parents acting like they are the coach also. My parents were, I hate to be that guy too, but I mean, my parents never coached me in my upbringing. I had a coach, and I remember I wanted to quit football because I thought my coach was too hard on me. And my dad said, yeah, when he stops being hard on you, you can come back and talk to me. Other than that, I don't want to hear any more about quitting.
Right.
So I'm just saying, I just think parents need to let the coaches coach. And sometimes you're going to have a great coach, and sometimes you're going to have a coach that's not so great. Sure. And the kid needs to learn to deal with that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, it always is going to boil down to self-motivation. Look, I mean, let's look at where we're at in life right now when it comes to baseball. One of the things that I love about the game of baseball right now as a hitting coach here is the accountability that I have to have for myself to train our hitters, because a kid can fact check me now, right? Kids can go on YouTube, they can go on Instagram, they can go on social media, and they can look at, hundreds upon hundreds of sites and Instagram accounts on hitting, right?
Right.
So anything that I talk about with our hitters, they can fact check it. They can look it up on YouTube or on social media or Chat GPT and figure out if I'm giving them accurate information. Whereas when I was growing up, whatever the coach said, that was it. Yeah, that was the written word.
Yeah.
When it came to how to do a fundamental. So, I think that people have more access to information than ever before, when it comes to how to teach the game of baseball. And that can be a dangerous thing, right? That can give, I think, parents like, hey, I watch videos and I'm looking at all of this information, and, the coaches, and I'm better than the coach, and I know more than the coach. And, but what a parent has not done a lot of times is actually been in the shoes of a coach, where you have to manage 15 kids, 20 kids, 25 kids, run practices, organize all the pregame stuff, the travel, manage the game, put together the lineup, and manage all of that. It's challenging. Coaching is very, very challenging, and you can't make everybody happy. And the bottom line is just let your kid go out there and practice and play as hard as they can, and let the chips fall where they may. It will work out. I promise you. Yeah. It's going to work out the way it should. If you just allow them to go through the process.
And that really is the whole point of this podcast, is to allow that and be okay with whatever. I mean, not every kid's going to get to play in the SEC. Not every kid's going to get to play pro ball, and that's okay. I think a lot of people are just like, their worst fear in life is Johnny doesn't hit the goal of playing in the big leagues, and his life is devastated, and it's not the case at all. We're going to digress for just a second, because I was reading your bio and I really wanted to make a point. This has nothing to do with our 10 points. So I'm going to take a hard right now, because I want the parents to hear this. And I don't know what you're going to say about this, but you had two stats on your bio on your website that just jumped out at me. One was the high number of walks that your batters had, and this one really blew me away. I think you were one of the top teams in the country for getting hit by pitch. Now, both of those are not there by accident, but I guarantee you most of our parents are not like, why are we bragging about walks and getting hit by pitch? But I think I know the answer. But what? Tell me, give me yours.
Well, look, I think that when it comes to offense, right? Like what is the most important thing when it comes to offense? And it's scoring runs,
right?
You can't score runs if you don't get on base,
right?
Okay. So I'll give, everybody a little bit of kind of an insight as to what I believe in. It doesn't make my way better than anybody else's, but it's just what I believe in. So, the process of winning games when it comes to offense. So we have a goal. We want to try to score 7 runs a game. If we score 7 runs a game, we're going to win almost 90% of the time, right? Well, how do you score 7 runs in a game? Well, you're going to have to accumulate roughly about half of the at-bats in that game have to be quality at-bats. So once you identify what a quality at-bat is and actually define that for your players, there's a lot of ways to have a quality at-bat besides getting a hit.
Yeah.
2 of them are a walk or a hit by pitch.
Yeah.
Okay? If we get 9 walks or hit by pitch or stolen bases, which are free 90s.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 of them in a game.
Right.
You win about 90% of the time. So, where does that all start? It's real easy to talk about those things. It's another thing to actually train it, right?
Yeah.
It all boils down. Ted Williams said it many, many years ago in his book. It all boils down to getting a good pitch to hit.
Yeah. Right.
If you swing at good pitches and you take pitches that you can't hit hard, what happens? You hit the ball harder and you take your walks.
Right.
If it's not a pitch that I can hit hard in the middle of the field, I don't swing at it.
Yeah.
So I'm more selective. I'm more aggressive to a tighter strike zone, a hitter strike zone, not a pitcher strike zone. So we tend to try to shrink the strike zone, be aggressive to one pitch in one spot. And if it's an edge pitch, especially down, chase is down, damage is up. Right? So pitches up in the zone get hit pretty hard. Pitches down in the zone is where we swing and miss.
Right.
So we always say up is ours, down is his.
Okay.
And we try to hunt pitches that we can hit hard. And if we can't hit it hard, we take it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's a perfect system. But we want our guys to earn walks. Coach Monte Lee wants our guys to be ultra aggressive, and we are. We're super aggressive. We're swinging until we're not.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And that's a big, it's not that we're taking pitches because we're passive. We're aggressively hunting a pitch that we can hit hard, and we stop our swing if it's not a pitch we can hit hard. And the byproduct of that is, as we put together competitive at bats, we tend to walk a decent amount. And if the ball's going to hit us, unless it's going to hit us in the head, you hold your ground and you get hit by the pitch.
That's the point. So you see kids diving out of the way of a 60-mile-an-hour curveball, and you're like, dude, the object's to get on base.
Well, the thing that people need to understand is when you walk in that little white box, that box belongs to the batter.
Right.
It does not belong to the pitcher.
Right.
And if a pitcher throws a pitch in that box, you don't move out of the way.
Yeah.
And I know parents, maybe they don't want to hear that, but I'll tell you another thing too. You want to have a good 2-strike hitter.
Yeah.
The kids that are the best 2-strike hitters are the kids that stay in there.
Yeah.
They stay on the ball. They keep their nose on the baseball.
Right.
Those kids tend to get hit by more pitches.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
And they're on base.
So they don't pull off the
team.
pitch. They don't come off the ball, and they don't get out of the way when the ball's going to hit them.
Well, you know what? I see your eyes lighting up talking about hitting an offense. If I'm invited back, I'm coming back. We're going to do this again, and then that will be the subject. But, that's good stuff, Coach. So we're at number 10. Man, we've covered so much great ground. This is one that I see parents doing, and maybe you've had an experience. They're comparing their son to the other kids, and it's not fair to the kid. Kids mature at different ages and things, but, what could you say about, the developmental process? You've been in this a long time, kids developing differently, but the whole idea of comparing kids.
That's a great question, and maybe the best question in my mind that I've gotten. And I'm going to tell you why, because it's something we talk about an awful lot with our players here. Comparison is a killer. That's a statement that I use quite a good bit. Wow. Comparison is a killer. Yeah. You want to kill the confidence of a player?
Yeah.
Compare him to another player.
Right.
You are your own individual person and player. Like, you have your own unique strengths and weaknesses, the way that you think about things, the way that you react to things. Comparing yourself to another player is a killer. I'll tell you a great story. I had a young man that played for me when I was the head coach at Clemson, who had transferred from another school, right? And he had to sit out. Like in those
back in those
sit
days,
out.
yeah.
And when he transferred, he was a middle infielder. And I told him, hey, I have basically 3 guys in your position. So I just want to make you aware of it. I was trying to be upfront and honest. Said, hey, you got to sit out here If you transfer here in your position, you have 3 other guys that are in your position. Say, Coach, I could care less. I want to come and play for you.
Wow.
That was a great answer.
That's confidence.
Well, the player wound up playing every single day for me for 2 years, got drafted, played up to AA, and had a great career. He didn't care about the other players. Right. It's more about, this is what I want to do. This is the right fit for me. I'm going to come in there and show you what I'm capable of. It wasn't about other guys in their position.
Right.
And I think that said a lot to me about that young man. And those are the things that I look for in a player. Like, comparing yourself to another player is only going to put more pressure on you to be better than that player.
Right.
And the harder you try to be better than another kid, a lot of times the worse you play. Just focus on what you do and what you do well. Do your job in whatever position your coach puts you in, wherever he hits you into order. Do the very best you can, and it's going to work out for you. But I'm a huge believer that comparing your kid to somebody else is very, very dangerous.
I agree, but it's rampant, because what they're seeing is Johnny's doing this, my kid's not. So, and they'll talk to me about it. They'll say, well, I see all these other kids doing this stuff and my kid's not doing it. And, and it's just like, first of all, those other kids you're talking about are, early bloomers. Your kid probably is going to be a late bloomer, and we're comparing 2 different animals here.
Sure.
So anyway, it's a dangerous thing. The point for me to help educate parents is, he is, like you said, a unique player. We don't need to compare him to anybody else. Let's let the natural thing unfold. Wow. Okay. We are at the end, and I told you we're going to end this on a positive high note, because we talked a lot about the things that parents could be doing to hurt, but I want to end on what they could be doing to help. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 concepts I want to share with you and get your opinion of these. The first one is simply to support and encourage dreams. Mm-hmm. You mentioned your parents. You had great parents, but when it comes to your dreams and your aspirations, tell me about how that was and what you could say parents about. Because, a lot of times parents are afraid to let their kids dream.
Yeah. I can only speak for myself, right? And my walk as a player, and that's been quite some time ago. Look, when I got to high school, I wanted to get on the field and play. And it took me until my sophomore year to actually get on the field and play for the varsity team. When I was a junior, all of a sudden I'm an everyday player. I wound up being an all-conference player. By the time I'm a senior, it was actually like, hey, I might be able to play college baseball. Mm-hmm. That was my dream. I just wanted to play college baseball, and I didn't care what level it was. I just wanted an opportunity. Right. So when I got the opportunity, it was like a dream come true. Right. Well, when that dream came true and I got to college, what did I want to do? I wanted to be a starter. I wanted to play. And then I wanted to get drafted. Mm-hmm. Well, I worked as hard as I could to put myself in a position to be the best player that I could be. Mm-hmm. And the best advice I could probably give you on dreams, when it comes to dreams, is the man in the mirror. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you hang those spikes up and your playing days are over, can you look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know what? I did everything that I could do during my career to put myself in a position to be successful. Yeah. Yeah. That's literally what it boils down to in a nutshell, is just look at yourself in the mirror. Yeah. And I would suggest that to any parent. It's like, hey, son, if this game's not working out the way that you want it to, look at yourself in the mirror. Yeah. Are you doing everything that you can to put yourself in a position to be successful? Right. And if you are, just keep doing what you're doing. It's going to work out the way that it's supposed to. So for me, dreams are one thing. Mm-hmm. We all have those dreams. We want to get an opportunity to play college baseball or play pro baseball. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to, what are you willing to do? How hard are you willing to work? And how important is it to you to put into work, to put yourself in a position to be the best version of yourself? And to some kids, that's going to be junior college baseball, Division II baseball. That may be just playing varsity baseball, just being on the team. Right. Whatever that is, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and just ask yourself, am I doing everything I can to put myself in the position to be the best version of me.
That's great advice. You're literally tying the dream with the behavior together, and that way you have no regrets. But if you have the dream without the behavior,
It's not going to work.
It's going to be tough to look in the mirror.
That's correct.
Well, the last one, and this is a positive, in my opinion, a positive for the parents, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it, and that is just to treat your kid the same regardless of the results.
Mm-hmm.
I've had some bad experiences with parents. Man, they're kicking the dog because Johnny went 0 for 4.
Right.
So what could you say about just, we talked about not focusing on results, but just being okay, and letting the kid still have fun even though the results aren't there.
Now, I saw a speech quite a few years ago, and God rest his soul, another college baseball coach, Tony Robichaux, who was a longtime coach at Louisiana Lafayette, and he said it best. He said, when my career is over as a coach, who I am as a man matters a lot more than what I do as a coach.
Yeah, that's really well said.
And to me, I think that's pretty much what it boils down to.
Yeah,
right. It's like when, as a parent, your son cares a lot more about what you think about them as a person, than they do as a player. If you're constantly treating your son based on his performance as an athlete, and that can be really, really detrimental, to his development as a young man. So to me, and I experienced that kind of organically and naturally. My parents never really treated me, based on how I was playing in that particular sport in that given time.
Yeah.
So I never had to experience that. So I was pretty fortunate.
It's amazing how fast this time went by. I have enjoyed this thoroughly, and it's going to be great information for parents. I just want to publicly thank you. You have a lot of wisdom to share, and you gave your time graciously here to me and all the people listening. So thank you for what you're doing. You have a big time job here in the SEC, but somehow you managed to give back to the game, to parents. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Absolutely.